The first thing you need to verify when planning to deploy Windows 10 is that your computer or computers meet the minimum hardware requirements. These are a processor of at least 1 GHz or faster, either for 32-bit versions 1 GB of memory, or for 64-bit versions 2 GB of memory. 16 GB of free disk space for 32-bit versions of Windows 10, and 20 GB of free disk space for 64-bit versions. Reasonable graphics card, and a display resolution of at least 800 by 600. Now, anybody looking at this list can see this is not a particularly taxing list. Pretty much any modern computer will exceed this quite significantly. So you shouldn't encounter any problems in terms of meeting the minimum requirements. The next thing you've got to do is to verify that any hardware devices that you might have or peripherals are supported by Windows 10. So you'll need to check for some drivers. If you're buying new computers, it's highly unlikely you'll need to take any further action. New computers will have components that are supported by Windows 10. If you've got older peripherals or older hardware devices, visit the hardware vendor's website to see if you can find some Windows 10 specific drivers. Remember that for 32-bit versions of Windows you'll need 32-bit drivers, and for 64-bit versions of Windows 10 you'll need 64-bit drivers. If you can't find a specific driver for Windows 10, then you might be able to use a driver from an earlier version of Windows. So for example, you might be able to use a driver from Windows 8.1. If you've got a lot of computers and devices to verify, consider using something like the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit to perform the assessment for you. You can use MAP to determine the upgrade feasibility to Windows 10 on scanned devices. As you'll see in a demonstration in a moment, you can scan using a number of different techniques. You can determine whether your organization is ready to migrate to Microsoft Azure or Microsoft Office 365. You can also use the tool to plan for Hyper-V workloads. Let's use MAP now to help determine Windows 10 readiness. Okay, so I'll open up the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. I want to run this as administrator, so I'll confirm the user account control prompt. After a moment, MAP initializes. And what you're seeing here is a previous assessment. I'm going to create a new assessment. So there's an existing database here. I'll create a new inventory database. I'll call it test. Click OK. And as you can see on the left-hand side here in the navigation bar, there are a number of assessment types that you can run. Assess for cloud readiness, assess desktop computers, assess servers, assess desktop virtualization workloads and server virtualization workloads, and so on. What we're doing here is assessing the readiness for Windows 10, so I'll select the desktop option. And already you can see there's an option for assessing Windows 10 readiness, and I can collect the inventory data by clicking the link here. You can see a list of different computer types. I'm going to examine Windows computers. I can connect to these Windows computers using a number of different techniques via Active Directory, or using certain Windows networking protocols, or by scanning an IP address range. I'm going to scan an IP address range because that's more suitable for my test environment here. I'll enter the address range. And then click through. Now, when I'm connecting to each of the computers that are discovered, I need to supply credentials to do that. So I'll specify an account for admin and enter the password. And also a secondary account for other computers. And either one of those will be used. So when I'm ready, I can click Next. And this is just summarizing that it's going to connect as admin and then as Andrew to each of the computers that it detects to see if it can connect with WMI to scan the computer. A summary of what I'm asking it to do is shown there. And if I click Finish, it will start the collection. I'll expand and show you the detail. It's now running the assessment against the discovered machines. It's completed that. Click Close, and we can see here on the summary screen that there are 2 computers that are ready for Windows 10. There are, in fact, only 3 devices on this test network. And one of the machines, there is insufficient data to make an assessment, and that's because it's not running Windows 10. Or rather, it's not running any version of Windows. It tells us a bit more down here about the Internet Explorer versions that have been discovered and the number of clients. Let's examine the Windows 10 readiness details. You can see a bit more of an assessment here of that discovery. But there's also a link up here to generate a Windows 10 readiness report, which we can view in Excel. I'll do that now. And it takes us to the folder where the assessment report has been stored. And I can just open that up by double-clicking. So here we have an overall assessment. Meets minimum system requirements. There are 2 that meet the requirements. And there are none that are not ready for Windows 10. And there is 1 for which there is insufficient data. We can take a look at the Assessment Values tab, and that will tell us what it was looking for. So it was looking for a CPU of 1 GHz or higher, an amount of memory, an amount of free disk space, and so on. On the Client Assessment tab, we can have a look at the specific computers that were discovered. CL1, that's actually this local computer, meets the minimum system requirements, and it doesn't require any kind of hardware upgrade. And if we scroll across here, we can see its IP address, the subnet mask, that it's currently running Windows 10 Enterprise, so obviously it is ready for Windows 10. And beneath it we can see the other computer that was discovered, which is running Windows 10 Pro, and we can find out details about that particular machine. On the device summary page, you can have a look at the particular features of a particular device. So we've got some power settings here, got some information about the network adapter, and so on. So it's quite detailed information. And on the final tab, we've got a discovered applications information. It tells us about the software that it's been able to discover. Skype for Business Online, for example, the Windows PowerShell module, Skype 7.4, CCleaner, connects an HD audio. It's done a very thorough job. And then you can skim through this report and determine whether or not your organization is ready to make the move to Windows 10. Now in this simple test network there are only a couple of machines, so it's not giving us a real feel of the power of the application. Let's switch back to the assessment tool, and I'll open up a database that was previously created. You can see there are a larger number of machines here, 234 are ready for Windows 10. Some of which will be ready immediately, some of which require upgrades. If we click on the desktop tab here and then go to Windows 10 Readiness, again you can see a bit more detail about the tests that were performed, but possibly the most useful thing is to go to generate a Windows 10 Readiness report and view it in Excel. So here we have the report. 72 machines are ready now. 234 will be ready after a hardware upgrade. Let's take a look at the client assessment to make that determination. So this one, for example, this particular computer is not ready for Windows 10 because it has insufficient memory. Okay, again, insufficient memory. This one here, free disk space is less than 20 gig. And once again, we can go on to device summary to find out a bit more about what's out there in terms of hardware and devices. And we can take a look at any discovered applications. It may be, for example, that we know that there are issues with some of these applications, and that might make a difference to how we proceed with the upgrade plan. Okay, so in the demonstration you saw how to use MAP to help determine your organization's readiness for Windows 10. The next thing on the checklist is to verify application compatibility. Now, most applications that work in Windows 7 will also work in Windows 10. But if you experience problems, check for application updates. Consider upgrading to a more recent version of the application. Create a compatibility fix using the application compatibility tools. These are part of the Windows Assessment and Deployment Toolkit. Alternatively, build virtual machines to host the application. If you decide to use the application compatibility tools, use the following high-level procedure to create application fixes. First, build a representative Windows 10 computer. Then install the required applications. Run the applications to determine any problems. Install the application compatibility tools. Open the Compatibility Administrator. There are two versions of this, one for 32-bit apps and one for 64-bit apps. Create a custom database. The database is used to hold the fix. Create a new application fix. Run your application and perform a series of standard tasks to verify that it's working properly. And then save the application compatibility fix file. This has a .sdb extension. You can then apply the fix file to the application within your organization. Let's use the application compatibility tools now to see how that works. Okay, so we're ready to perform upgrades on various computers around our organization, but we've discovered that there are some potential problems with some of the applications. We have a test application on this virtual machine that will simulate some of the sorts of problems that you might experience, and then we'll take a look at how we can create a workaround, a patch if you like, a shim for that particular application. The application is called Stock Viewer. And you can see straight away that it wants us to be an administrator. So we'll click OK to that message. And then within the application, I can run some of the options. So for example, I can say, show me options, and it comes up with an error message. I can say, show me a star, and it tells me that the application needs to be running under Windows XP, not Windows 10. And I can click on trends here, and again we get a not very helpful message here to show that there are problems. So this application isn't going to work properly under Windows 10. Now we have a number of different options, and we could create a virtual machine running Windows XP and install the application within that environment. But we can also try and patch the application. Let's take a look at how we could do that. So let me close the application, and then I'm going to open up one of the compatibility tools, part of the Windows ADK. So down here I've got Windows Kits, and I've got the Compatibility Administrator tool, which I'm going to open now. There are two versions, 32-bit and 64-bit, depending on the application that you're using. This is a 32-bit app. I'm going to create a new database for this fix. The name of the application to be fixed is called Stock Viewer. I don't know the vendor. I need to locate the executable for the program. There it is. Now we already know that it needs to run under Windows XP, so we can select Run in Compatibility Mode for Windows XP. That was one of the messages that we saw. We also saw that it required that we ran as administrator. So let's scroll down into these other compatibility modes. They're alphabetical, so that helps. Run as admin. There may be some additional things that you discover. There's a lot of compatibility parameters here. We don't need any of these right now. And then we'll say we're finished. So what I now need to do is to save this. I'm going to call this Stock Viewer Fix. And for my convenience, I'm going to put it on my desktop. All fixes are stored as SDB files, and although I can simply apply it using an executable locally, I can also distribute these fixes using something like group policy or creating a script or using some other mechanism for applying the patch to a large number of computers. I can close down the compatibility administrator now, and there's our fix file. To apply that to the application, I need to open a command prompt. PowerShell will do actually, in admin mode. And then I need to run the SDB inst program against that particular file. So that's stored under the users folder. I'm signed in as Andrew, and it's on my desktop. And I called it stock viewer fix.sdb. And as I said, clearly running this on every single computer, if you have thousands of computers with the application installed, is a bit too time consuming. So you'd use some mechanism to distribute the fix. It's applied that fix. So now if I run the stock viewer application, it doesn't prompt me about being an administrator, it just confirms elevation to admin. And now I can say trends, that now functions. I can choose tools, show me a star. And although that's not exactly thrilling, it does in fact function. So it appears as if the fix has solved the issue with this application. Consider using a shim when you have no other alternative. It's possible your vendor may have produced an update to the application, or it's possible that if it's an internal application that some of your team can develop the application to function within Windows 10, or you could consider running in a VM as we discussed earlier. But you can also create these fixes and distribute that if you have no other option. In the demonstration, you saw how to use the application compatibility tools to verify and to fix application compatibility problems.